In response to these comments by Mr. Hardy, Senator Danahauer says, "Let me ask you this question. Considering the withholding tax, simply the Treasury withholds it currently and applies the proceeds against the tax due in a given year." Mr. Hardy, the deduction from salaries and interest and so on at the source question? Senator, yes. Mr. Hardy, yes. Senator, that is a currently applied method of withholding so much of the consumer purchasing power as it is represented by the tax collected or withheld. Mr. Hardy, that is right, Senator, and the applied as against the tax due. Mr. Hardy, yes. The withholding tax provision has the effect of withholding purchasing power at the time the income is realized rather than a year hence through the income tax structure. Senator, and if it were in effect for 1 year, it would apply only 1 year? Mr. Hardy, I guess so. Senator, yeah. Whereas this proposal is a continuing thing. Mr. Hardy, it seems to me that the essential difference is that the withholding tax plan applies at the point of receipt of income, and this applies at the point of expenditures of income. Senator, of course, you withhold not only from the taxpayers, but non-taxpayers. Mr. Hardy, yes, some of the people that I talked to about this plan, Federal Reserve people, have been rather favorable to the idea. Mr. Jacobstein, don't you want to add that Mr. Selko pointed out that such difficulties are as encountered in the states, partially at least overcome when you have a uniform federal tax, where you have a uniform tax all over the country by one administration, the federal government, it is easier to administer it than a sum total of 48 states? Now that was Mr. Selko's conclusion. Remember what Vivian Kellum said about apportionment. And remember that the fraudulent ratification of the 16th Amendment wiped out that apportionment. Let's move on to the statement of Milton Friedman, Division of Tax Research, Treasury Department. Senator Danahauer, I have only one other thought on that point. In the event of withholding from the owner of stock and no taxes due ultimately, where does he get his refund? Mr. Friedman, you are thinking of a corporation or an individual? Senator, I'm talking about an individual. Friedman, an individual will file an income tax return, and that income tax return will constitute an automatic claim for refund. And that's the end of those comments. What bald-faced lies. Mop up purchasing power? Fleecing Americans dry is a more accurate way to describe this terrible injustice against we the people. How about letting Americans decide to save the fruits of their labor? No, the government wants it all. Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution gives Congress the power to issue money, not the privately owned Federal Reserve banking cartel. Article 1, Section 8 says Congress shall issue money, quote, to coin money, regulate the value thereof, unquote. Cut out the middleman, the Fed, and the Treasury wouldn't need the money. What a con game going on against the American people. T. Coleman Andrews, who was a Democrat, was commissioner for the first 33 months of the Eisenhower administration. He was the commissioner of the IRS, and he stated the following in an article for U.S. News and Report, May 25th, 1956. Remember, the commissioner of the IRS, quote, "We're confiscating property now. That's socialism. It's written into the Communist Manifesto. Maybe we ought to see that every person who gets a tax return receives a copy of the Communist Manifesto with it so he can see what's happening to him," unquote. Beardsley Ruml, chairman of the Federal Reserve Bank of New York, stated in one of his speeches in 1946, quote, "The second principal purpose of federal taxes is to attain more equality of wealth and of income than would result from economic forces working alone. The taxes which are effective for this purpose are the progressive individual income tax, the progressive estate tax, and the gift tax. What these taxes should be depends on public policy with respect to the distribution of wealth and of income. It is important here to note that the estate and gift taxes have little or no significance as tax measures for stabilizing the value of the dollar. Their purpose is the social purpose of preventing what otherwise would be high concentration of wealth and income at a few points as a result of investment and reinvestment of income not expended in meeting day-to-day consumption requirements. These taxes should be defended and attacked in terms of their effects on the character of the American people, not as revenue measures. Taxes on corporation profits have three principal consequences, all of them bad, unquote. Remember, ladies and gentlemen, those estate and inheritance taxes, the person that has given it to you or willed it to you, they've already paid taxes through the nose unconstitutionally all their lives. And now, when your loved one is buried and in the ground, the vultures, the scavengers come in from the government to continue picking their bones and tax and tax and tax. Does the average man or woman in America know all this information? What do we mean when we say that the IRS is not part of an agency of the government? What? What do you mean when we say the IRS is an agency of the government? Of course it is. Well, let me read you from a document from a U.S. attorney submitted in court documents in a tax case up in Idaho. Quote from the document, Betty Richardson, United States Attorney, Box 32, Boise, Idaho, civil case number 93-405-E-EJL, United States Answer and Claim Re, Diversified Metal Products, Inc., Plaintiff versus T-Bone, Internal Revenue Service. We're going to go to page 4, paragraph 4 of this government document in court. Quote, the U.S. government denies that the Internal Revenue Service is an agency of the United States government. If the IRS is not an agency of the federal government, just what is it? I know, but we don't have time to go into all of this minutia on the CD at this time. In a nutshell, the income tax is international in scope and is not incumbent upon domestic Americans. That is a provable fact, and that is why this U.S. attorney denies the U.S. government that the Internal Revenue Service is an agency of the United States government. The IRS for more than 80 years has been misapplying the Internal Revenue Code against unsuspecting Americans and back up their unlawful activities with brute force. This must stop. What can you do? The federal government must generate revenues to operate what our founding fathers created, a limited form of Republican government. State constitutions are all guaranteed a limited form of Republican government. America is not a democracy. We believe America is a nation of laws and not lies. We can't have it both ways for political expediency or to please any and every special interest group that bribes politicians at all levels with the politically correct PAC money. Sometimes it's difficult to be the messenger of news that people would rather not hear. However, Americans can no longer remain in their comfort zones because the message isn't what they want to hear. If your house is on fire, you don't sit around and continue to watch the TV set. You call the fire department. America, our house is on fire, and it is the obligation of every American to safeguard the liberties and freedoms given to us by those who paid the ultimate price. Please join the growing numbers of millions of Americans who are ready to take back our country and stop the assault on our rights.